Conservation Ag Update is brought to you by Yetter Farm Equipment. Hey, welcome to Conservation Ag Update. Long time no see, and big thanks to Yetter for hopping on board as our sponsor this quarter. All right, let's begin in Jackson, Wisconsin, where I just paid a visit to no-till innovator Ross Bishop. So he's implementing a lot of practices you hear us talking about on this program every month. Yeah, there's a lot going on at Ross's farm, including this prairie strips project that he's working on with the Sand County Foundation. We'll have more on that later in our video of the week. Now, Ross no-tills all his corn, and he plants multi-species cover crop mixes wherever he can. He started planting green back in 2012 and never looked back, even after dark, as you can see here.
In 2012, when we all know it was a really bad drought here, and I planted a 45-acre field of annual ryegrass, and that grew the next spring. I ended up planting that field around the 18th of May, and it was above my knee. So we were probably 2 feet tall with annual ryegrass, and I thought this was going to be a disaster. And I split the field in half, soybeans and corn. My yield average that year on the farm was 116. That planted field into cover crops was 178. The beans were 45. My average beans were 33 across the whole farm. So I found huge value planting green, and I've been doing that ever since 2012.
We saw Ross planting in the dark earlier, and here he is planting in the snow. He seeded cereal rye, about 70 pounds per acre, into corn stubble with a 30-foot drill on January 15th after he got back from the National No-Tillage Conference. Ross says it was 18 inches tall when he planted soybeans green into it this past spring. So Ross's farm is also one of 24 across the Lake Michigan basin participating in a soil sensor project being led by the Sand County Foundation. We tagged along with Field Projects Director Greg Olson as he installed the CropX soil moisture and temperature sensors on the farm across the street from Ross, which is under conventional management. So these sensors collect soil moisture and temperature readings at 4, 12, and 22 inches. And by comparing data from fields under soil health management with data from adjacent conventionally managed fields, the idea is that farmers will better understand how management can influence water infiltration and holding capacity, leaching potential, aggregate stability, and other critical soil properties. So I asked Greg for some of his biggest takeaways from this study so far.
One of the things that we do tend to see is there's better water management in the soil of the soil health systems. Now, I'm not going to say it's drastic. It's but we're seeing that it's better in general, and that comes from in drought. Like we had sites in Dodge County years ago, and we noticed that when the drought hit, the soil health system was actually maintaining about 1% to 2% better soil moisture in the peak of the drought, which that technically could be, when you're getting close to wilting point and crop death, that could be an extra couple of days, maybe even a week or two. So that's very critical in a drought. Now, on the opposite side of things, when you come down to these extreme rain events we have, the soil health management systems are able to infiltrate a little better from what we've seen. So that means that they're managing that water better from both sides. It's managing keeping the water when you need it, and also migrating the water out when there's too much.
And if you're wondering what the soil health management principles are, well, Sand County lists 6 of them. Minimize soil disturbance, maximize soil cover, maximize plant diversity, maximize presence of living plants and roots, integrate livestock, and know your context. All right, let's see what McCain Vogel has cooking up in today's Cover Crop Connection. McCain.
Thanks, Noah. Earlier this summer, I caught up with Pennsylvania no-tiller Grant Troop, and he filled me in on a unique smart manure aeration system that puts dollars and time back in the pockets of no-tillers, and he even refers to it as a soil health dream. Let's check it out.
Air comes up through and it'll circulate sections so the whole thing's done. Does each section about a minute. And it keeps the manure constantly homogenized, oxidized. You oxidize the compounds in the manure that are toxic, like hydrogen sulfide, methane gas, ammonia. Those things all get oxidized, so they're not a problem. There's no dangerous elements to haul in the manure anymore. With the oxidation, you remove about 90% of the odor of the manure. So if you're in an area where you have neighbors that don't like smelling manure, you really have something spread out now that's going to smell more like compost than manure, which makes it really nice. The nutrients are instantly available to the plant. So guys putting manure out to plant corn, no-till corn. Historically, we've worried about how long it's going to take for those nutrients to become plant available. With this system, the nutrients are instantly available to the new crop, so you don't have that lag time. You can reduce the amount of nitrogen you put on at planting time and have a really prolific crop starting up. You don't have to do any agitation to haul the manure because it's in a constantly homogenized state all the time. If you got a growing crop in the summer, hay field, in the spring, if you're growing forage crops, you can go and spread on those crops right away. Instant feed. It coats the crop in a different way than regular pit manure. Regular pit manure will leave a kind of a shiny, sticky coat on the crop. And oftentimes, when you get to harvest, that bottom that you spread the manure on will still have a coating of manure. It increases the ash content. You're taking in manure with the forage. With this material, you'll see that it flakes off, dries off, it flakes off the crop right away. Doesn't have that shiny, sticky layer to it. So it goes straight to the soil and the nutrients instantly available in the oxidized form, which is where you want the plant nutrients for crop availability.
Troop says users have reported about a 15% increase in just hay yields alone where they're putting aerated manure on the crops. Well, that's all for this week's Cover Crop Connection. Until next time, I'm McCain Vogel. Back to you, Noah.
Great stuff as always. Thank you very much, McCain. Big news in the precision technology world now. Sabanto takes another leap in its quest for a widespread autonomy after receiving a big funding round from Leaps by Bayer, which is the strategic investment unit of Bayer. So Sabanto's goal here is to expand its dealer network and increase the production and deployment of its retrofit kits in row crop operations. The kits transform tractors into fully autonomous machines with a cloud-connected communication system, multiple GNSS receivers, obstacle detecting sensors, cameras, and AI. So a couple weeks ago, we shared the story of Quint Pottinger, who used the Sabanto kit to autonomously plant over 800 corn acres, many of which were no-tilled into thick cereal rye. Sabanto CEO and founder Craig Rupp tells me other farmers have saved big money on labor and equipment costs with autonomy, and 3 years from now, he believes the technology is going to be everywhere.
It's going to be mainstream, and the future I see is multiple smaller systems versus one large system. It makes complete sense to me. You go out with a 400 horsepower machine versus 4 smaller 100 horsepower machine. When you unleash a 400 horsepower tractor into a field, and the field gets done in 2 hours, you're going to be spending the day chasing this tractor, moving it from one to the other. Whereas smaller systems, they're going to take a little bit longer, and you have redundancy. It's more scalable. I get more acres. I can just get one smaller system as opposed to spending $2 million for a large system. They're easier to work on. They're less complicated. They're more fuel efficient. And that's the future I see 3 years from now. You know what? If I go back 3 years and if I said there's going to be a day when a farmer's going to farm all his corn acres autonomously, everyone would have laughed at me. If I would have said it a year ago, they would have said, no, it's not going to happen. It happened already. Quint.
Interesting perspective there. Craig formed an advisory board consisting of about 24 farmers. They meet with COO Corey Spietti once a month to receive updates on the technology and give their feedback on how it can be improved. Well, back to Ross Bishop's farm now as promised for our video of the week. What does a no-tilled field look like after getting over 9 inches of rain in one night? Let's find out.
It's August 10th. We just had 9.1 inches of rain overnight. And it's 11 o'clock in the morning, probably closer to 11:30. And I'm looking at a no-till wheat field. And the water coming off is crystal clear. You can see right through it. And if we had that tilled soil, that would be brown like chocolate milk. And that'd be heading down to Lake Michigan, and I'm sure nobody would want that. We have no-till and cover crops here for 30 years, and I see my yields getting better every year and less labor, and I save fuel. And as I get older, I don't have the ambition to do the rock picking and working the ground. Prairie strip in the background. August 28th will be a field day on that. So we are enjoying our no-till and cover crops and making the environment a better place. You enjoy.
If you have any videos you'd like to see on the program, send them my way in Newman@LessiterMedia.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, before we go, I want to let you know our National Strip Tillage Conference is coming up August 6th in Springfield, Illinois. Hope to see you there. We have more info at striptillconference.com. And here's a taste of what to expect.
A lot of great knowledge, meeting some great people to visit with, bounce ideas off of. So been a very good experience so far. Attended a classroom session about cover crops and paired with strip till, and the class was really good. It confirmed some of the things we're doing is we're on the right track. Also gave a few other things to kind of incorporate for great ideas. Really important for us to be here today, just because I think this is where the industry's going. Strip till, I think, is a great thing to be in. Soil health, I think from a production standpoint, from a fertility standpoint, we're just excited to see where we're going to go with this thing.
I really enjoy coming and talking to other growers, and I was here last year for the first time, and I really enjoyed getting to talk to other guys. We're all trying to do the same thing, be successful with a strip till, and taking something away I think is why you want to be here. Plus, I also enjoy listening to all the people that speak, because you should get something from them. So the two roundtables that I went to were very good. I mean, they were full of people and it was nonstop. We probably could have went for hours in a couple of those things. So I really enjoyed that.
This has been a real good experience in the fact that, to get together with folks that have been strip tilling for a long time and some that are considering it. For those of us that have been doing it for quite a while, it's a great opportunity to interact with other folks that talk about their trials, tribulations, what works, what doesn't work, and then the advantage to see the vendors and what's available is a tremendous asset and a good learning experience.
Where I'm at, there's not a lot of people that do what we do with the strip tilling and the cover crops, and so for me to try to find other people to kind of bounce ideas off of and talk to vendors, manufacturers, get different ideas. This is the closest place I can go to get that much information all in one spot, rather than try to have to make a whole bunch of phone calls and guess around to kind of what guys are doing.